This session is specifically targeting those who are involved in the approval of multiple projects. Okay, so if you're one of those, maybe you're a campus SRC or IRB person, or you're a teacher that needs to approve that's an adult sponsor for multiple students in your classroom, or anyone who is involved in a higher fair, okay, or in a higher group like district SRC and so on. So what we envisioned is for us, I believe it's more helpful if if a group like this can actually get together and look at specific projects that you can actually discuss about and see where you stand at in terms of if you were given this scenario for you to evaluate, how would you do it? Okay. So what we did was to create we're going to be looking at 4 different case studies. And the 4 case studies would deal with specific projects. So there's a scenario, and then we'll give you time to discuss it. We're gonna divide okay, if this is gonna work, hopefully we can do 4 breakout rooms. We'll just randomize it and evenly distribute it to every single one. And then each breakout room, we're gonna give you a case study. It's gonna be a link to a Google form. We're gonna share it, and then everyone can jump into it, read the scenario, and then you can actually look at if you look at the scenario and you're one of the approving person, like the SRC person. How would you look at this project based on what we've presented, or based on your extensive knowledge if you're a seasoned SRC person, or if you're brand new? What are you supposed to be looking at or paying attention to in that particular project? Okay, and in that particular scenario. And if I can share my screen, let me see if I am allowed to. Oh, cool. I am. Okay, something like this one. Okay, so this is a case study. It's about potentially hazardous biological agents. What we want you to do is answer these questions, and there are multiple parts to it. Adding depth and complexity to the scenario, and then so there's a scenario here. What we want you to answer is, and this is going to be the same for all the projects, what additional information would you as an adult sponsor need before proceeding? Should the project be approved? Why or why not? What supervision is needed? Is the project allowed to be done at home, or does it need to be in a standard high school lab? Or why not? What other forms are needed in addition to the required ones, because the required ones are 1A, and 1B. What additional questions or considerations might you have? So we provided tables here at the bottom for every portion. And so what we want to do is for everyone to jump into, if you're in that breakout room, jump into this case study. We'll post the link in the chat when you get to the breakout room. And collaborate with one another. We encourage you to discuss with one another what are the things that you want to type in here. And then when we come back after about 15-20 minutes, we'll provide every group about 5 minutes to do their presentation. What did you learn and what were your questions? And then we can have a meaningful discussion about it. Maybe just 5 to 7 minutes each scenario. And then we'll wrap up the whole session. Okay? So that's how we're gonna do the workshop slash. And don't worry if you got into a case study, we'll give you access to the rest of this. By the way, I do want to acknowledge that these are not original case studies created by me. This is actually a result of a workshop that we attended in one of the very last face-to-face international fairs that we had in 2019. okay, because we did not have any a face-to-face. All right, so welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had uh, at least a first-hand experience of what are the details in really looking at a project, and what do you need to consider when it comes to some of these projects that are amazing, but sometimes we have to pause and think about, okay, what do I need to consider when it comes to this? Okay, so what we'll do is we have about 20 minutes remaining. Um, Quickly, let's just do a one time. I'll just call on every room and just share in general what was your scenario and what was the results of it, and I can actually share your form. All right. So I do want to call on uh, Breakout Room One. What was your general scenario, and any representative there? Maybe 1 or 2
Sure.
minutes to just share.
The general scenario was they were using Saccharomyces cerevisiae to digest aloe vera leaves and then produce gas and determine the volume of the gas that was produced from that experiment. And so that experiment could be done at home because it's baker's yeast. An adult sponsor could be used, and because it's basically stuff that should be safe. Form 3 would be asked for just to cover any basic safety considerations. Anybody else want to add something?
Okay. So in part 1, they were dealing with yeast, and one of the things that you do need to consider is yeast, especially if it's baker's yeast. It's actually exempt from the SRC. So it doesn't really require prior SRC approval. So that's one thing that you needed to consider here. I'm not sure if you got to the other parts, but we do have a cheat sheet for this one, and we'll be sharing this with everyone. That part really doesn't require much. It doesn't even require qualified scientist or designated supervisor, just an adult sponsor. Can be done at home. Um, no other forms needed. Okay, so that's the gist of it. There's 3 more parts, but in the interest of time, I am gonna jump to the second group, which is the engineering project. Can anyone in that group share your scenario, and I will pull up your, is this one? Yeah, the engineering project.
Okay, in this project, a student wanted to develop an app that would detect a regular heartbeat. We took the first word there that was key was detect, that borders on diagnose, which we say the student could not do. We would direct the student, he could build an app and test it on himself to see if it would actually measure heartbeat, heart rate, that sort of thing. And that would certainly be allowable without a qualified scientist and at home. He, in the next part, he wanted to test it on friends. And at that point, it would become a human subjects project because he's no longer testing it on just himself. Again, if he wanted to compare this to heart rates, his mother, who was the adult sponsor and also a physician, could become the qualified scientist and could allow him in the presence to test it on other people, have informed consent, of course, and then allow him to compare it to another device that would accurately measure a heartbeat. And therefore, he could have some data.
All right, so pretty short and simple. Couple of things that I do want to mention here. Once someone actually develops a device and then test it even on themselves, qualified scientists should be a must there, just to make sure that there is supervision and there is approval of the process, the procedure, especially as Dr. Caffrey said, the mother can be the qualified scientist. So it can double up. If you already said that needs adult sponsor, why not a qualified scientist to double up with that? So that should be perfect for this. But you are correct. Part 1 is allowable. There's not a whole lot of forms required here, except I would require form 2 in this scenario. Now, for the second part, yes, it is now a human subject project. What you want to also consider, however, is because this is a diagnosing device, then a lot of other things gets triggered in the medical profession. Are you now gonna be what are you gonna do with your human subjects? Are you gonna give them the information of the result? Because if you do, then you might now be violating a rule where you're now diagnosing, and you're not authorized to do that. You're not qualified to do that. See, are you gonna withhold the information? Because if you do, then that triggers a lot of ethical problems, like what if you did not inform them and they do have heart concern? So those are the problems there. Okay. So those are the things that you need to consider here, and that's for that reason this project needs to actually be done in a regulated research institution with an IRB that will look into the process and they will know what to do. That's the requirement for this part too. It cannot be just done in a school setting where the IRB in the school is actually approving it. So I hope that's something that we all learned, because now you're going into the legalities of medical diagnosing. Okay.
Don, have a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because students may not diagnose, we were not going to allow that project as a detection, but just as a measuring. Can I develop an app that will measure heartbeat or heart rate?
So then that needs to be reflected in the actual research plan, definitely. It should be something that says it's not for diagnosing or anything like that. So if that's the case, then yes. And I know that there has to be greater detail, and those are the questions you have to be asking the student to provide. Okay. All right. Let's go to the third scenario. This is the pig project. I'm not sure if this is the form that you filled up. I think Elena shared with you a form, right?
Yes. Do you want me to put it in the chat so that you have access to it, or would you like me to share screen?
If you can share screen, that should be okay too.
Okay, it says you cannot share screen while someone else is sharing.
Okay. You can just share with us your scenario, and then what was the fruits of your discussion?
Okay, perfect. So essentially, the student works with her family at a pig farm, and there is a certain virus called African swine fever, and that's a transboundary animal disease. So she wanted to swab their boots before and after, and then she wanted to swab the trailer before and after to see if it was going to transfer. And we basically said that we needed a whole lot more information because we don't know if this is a BSL level 1 or 2. If it's 1, that it would have to be done at the high school, more than likely it would be a 2, 3, or 4. So if it was a 2, that she could do it at a research facility, but 3 or 4, it wouldn't be allowed. Additional forms, we would need a 1C for a regulated research institute, form 2 for a qualified scientist, form 3 for a risk assessment. We were debating on a form 5A for the vertebrae and animal. But since she was just swabbing the shoes and the trailer, she wasn't actually swabbing the animal. We weren't sure. And then a form 6A for the risk assessment. And then in part 2, they told us that she has a friend that's a vet. And so we'd want to know the BSL level of the lab. And then with that supervision, when she was filling out the forms, who exactly would be supervising? What are their qualifications? When would the research be taking place? Who would be present to supervise? How would the specimens be disposed of afterwards? And a lot of that, we had an amazing person, Teresa, in our group. And so she kind of filled in things for us. Would be on the 6A form. And then direct supervision would be needed. So that's kind of how far we got. We knew for sure she couldn't do it at home, but it could possibly be done at the vet clinic.
Yeah. So we are going to share with you these cheat sheets for sure. But these are some of the things you want to consider. Part one is actually, it's a potentially hazardous biological agent project. So at that point, you should be considering Form 6, as you mentioned, okay? Primarily, and it cannot be done at home because this is swabbing and those things. You can get your samples directly and then place it in the plate, but seal it and then bring it to a BSL-1 lab. Part two is vet med disease lab. So it has to be done in a regulated research institution, okay, for sure. And because it needs to be BSL-2. Okay, and then if you part three is actually a human subject if you got to that point, and then part four, what if you want to do it for extend it to your family as well. So this one again, human subject, therefore IRB is required for this. Okay, so this is actually a pretty interesting scenario, especially if you're going to be living in a rural place like suburbs or outskirts, and some of my students do animal studies, and these are the considerations I actually look at. Okay, so I'll go with I'll call on the last group. Their project is Vertebrae Animal Project. Anyone who would like to unmute and discuss what the results of your discussion is?
Well, so, I mean, I will. This student is testing the blood of some mice after altering their diet by introducing broccoli to one group, but not the control group. So what we kind of talked through, there were a lot more, like, honestly, questions than firm answers we had. So there was some question about whether it would require definitely your veterinary form, the vertebrate animal form, your risk assessment form, the potentially hazardous biological agent form, as she was actually going to test the blood of the mice. And that was her part one. It doesn't list where her testing was going to happen. There were just a lot of extra questions we had. Where were you going to keep the mice? What happened after you were done with the mice?
Mm-hmm.
Her second part, she then wanted to also introduce broccoli to herself and hopefully her parents to test their blood sugar levels also to see if there was a difference there. So this would then include, right, her human participant forms and would require IRB approval.
Okay.
Then her part three was going to be done at a university where she tested another group, the non-obese diabetic mice, in addition to her wild type mice. Just three different parts of the same project. So essentially with each part, just more forms as she was adding more layers to it.
All right, so the cheat sheet there, part one is diabetic mice. So that can be done. That should be a BSL-1 project, but so that means it cannot be done at home. That's one thing that you need to really pay attention to this part. The second one, because you now added human subjects, then you need to pay attention to how is this going to be done, okay? And because it's something that really requires a lot of supervision, and you're also testing but bodily fluids, so that involves a lot of qualifications, and so yeah, I can the basics is this. You're gonna need to have pretty much all the forms in this part. Okay, because 6B is that bodily fluid, that's blood. That's also required. Okay, so this is very, very stringent. And then the last one, you're gonna have to make sure that number one, qualified scientist is really a must in this particular case. There has to be training and oversight. That's the reason why it has to be really done in a regulated research institution. It's going to require Form 1C for sure. And so, and because that you're working in a university, so that's just, but that's just a requirement that's at the end. Okay, so I can't really go into the details of this as much because in the interest of time, we have about 5 minutes, but we just hope that through these case studies, you had a first-hand experience of really what details are involved in doing an approval. And the basic questions that we gave you, those are the questions you should be asking yourself whenever you're evaluating a project. Okay, so these are the questions you have to have on the side. Okay, ask yourself, what additional information do I need? Do I have enough? Okay, um, can I go ahead and approve this? Why or why not? Who's going to be the supervisor? Can they do this at home, or they need a school or a research institution? And the additional forms that they need. Okay, so these are all part and parcel of what you need to be doing at the project level. We want to emphasize that if you do a very good job at the project level, not just approve it and then push it up and then let the higher SRC deal with it, that's when we end up with actually a lot more projects having to have a lot of those back and forth conversations. And if they finish the project, they might end up being disqualified because they did not follow the procedures. Okay. So I think we ran out of time. We have 3 minutes. Any comments, questions that you might have before we end? All right. So thank you very much for your participation. And we definitely will want to work with you as a group and as a community. Let's help one another because presumably Elena and I, we're not more into life sciences. We're chemistry teachers, physical science teachers more. So we'll definitely pool our resources and our communal knowledge to be able to help one another. But if you do have any questions, please ask them at the very start. Don't wait, okay?
Yes.
To be able to, so that we can address them early.
Looks like we did have one question. If a student only did blood test on herself, is it exempt from Phba? So it looked like from that one case study, when they just sampled their own self, they didn't have to do the Phba form. But I think let's see. I don't think you have to do IRB because you're testing yourself, but I believe you still need to do the blood form, the Phba. I believe blood form is still required.
Yeah, the 6B. Now, when it
I'm the one that wrote that. I think that's a change this year that I saw. Something about that they're still going to require IRB if you do a test on yourself. I mean, if the student tests on themselves. So you might want to look into that because I'm not sure.
Yes, we definitely will. Thank you. I hadn't seen that one. It's a good thing though, right? Having one more set of eyes on that type of project just to evaluate risk. I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and because you're the frontliners, you get these questions, bring it to us. We'll definitely find the answer for you. We're not saying we have the answer, but we can find the answer for you for sure. All right.
And then if we're going to be on SRC, do we need to let you know? District SRC, is it district or, you know, because we go from district and then to us. So I'm not sure how that registers to the district.
Dr. Damjan and Dr. Randu question.
No, absolutely. Yes. If you're going to participate on the SEFH, SRC, yes, please let us know so we can go ahead and confirm that in our backend system, especially with Scienteer, because, you know, we need a family unit to be able to provide all of the eyes on our projects that are going to be submitted to us on the regional front. So we do not want to have it to be Elena and John show by any means. You know, and so please, yes, we definitely employ and encourage all of your assistance. And if you are interested in actually being on the committee for the SRC, for SEFH, for the regional, please do reach out with us as well. And we will definitely have an onboarding training for you to take care of that. And we appreciate it. So at this time, I want to thank definitely Elena and Dr. Ramon for hosting these 2 SRC sessions, especially for the administrators and teachers. I think it was a very well worth the value and time and effort. We appreciate the scenario and being very interactive.